The badge hit the glass counter like a period at the end of a sentence. Not a question, not a request, a period. The man behind it, Alonzo Webb, 61 years old, retired detective, 32 years on the Chicago PD, didn't flinch when it landed. He'd learned a long time ago not to flinch at things that hurt. The pawn shop owner, a thin man named Garrett who smelled like cigarettes and WD-40, leaned over the counter and looked at the badge without picking it up. "Detective's shield," Garrett said. "Chicago, yes," Alonzo Webb said. "Retired, yes." Garrett turned it over, examined the back, set it down again. "I can do 40. Alonzo Webb stood very still. Outside, on the other side of the smudged window, rain was coming down in sheets. He'd walked 6 blocks in it because his car needed a new alternator and he didn't have the $212 to fix it. He'd walked 6 blocks in the rain at 61 years old with a bad left knee and a hip that had been grinding since last winter, and he'd carried the badge in his jacket pocket the whole way, feeling it move against his ribs with every step. $40. He thought about the electric bill on his kitchen counter. He thought about the prescription he'd been stretching for 3 weeks, having the pills when he wasn't supposed to. He thought about his daughter in Atlanta who didn't know any of this, and about how he planned to keep it that way. "All right," Alonzo Webb said. That was the moment the door chimed behind him. The man who walked in was younger, late 30s, maybe 40, broad across the shoulders, wearing a Postal Service jacket dark with rain. He was carrying a small cardboard box held together with packing tape, and he was breathing like he'd been walking fast. His name was Everett Sims. Everett Sims had been on his route since 6:30 that morning. He'd covered 9 miles on foot in the rain, delivering mail to 47 addresses, and he still had 2 hours left on his shift when his supervisor called and told him to take the rest of the afternoon. Budget cuts, reduced hours, 3rd time this month. He'd stood on someone's porch in the rain, holding a stack of envelopes and done the math in his head. The math didn't work. The math hadn't worked in 4 months. He'd gone home. He'd stood in his kitchen. He'd looked at the box on top of his refrigerator, the one he'd been looking at for 2 years, ever since his mother passed and left him everything she had, which turned out to be not very much except for one thing. He took the box down. He got back in the rain. Everett Sims walked into the pawn shop and stopped. He didn't mean to stop. He meant to walk straight to the counter, set the box down, get his money, and leave. Instead, he stopped because he could see, from where he was standing, just inside the door, what was on the glass counter in front of the older man: a badge, a detective's shield, and the older man's hands, flat on the counter on either side of it, steady, too steady, the kind of steady that takes practice. Everett Sims had seen that particular kind of stillness before. His father had it. His father, who'd worked 40 years at a steel plant in Gary, Indiana, and never once in Everett's presence let his shoulders fall, not when they cut his pension, not when the plant closed, not even at the end, when there was almost nothing left. Stillness as dignity. Stillness as the last thing you can hold on to when everything else has been taken. Everett Sims stood just inside the door and felt something move in his chest. He didn't move. Garrett was writing something on a slip of paper. "I'll need your ID," Garrett said, without looking up. "And I need you to sign here confirming the item isn't stolen property." Alonzo Webb reached into his back pocket for his wallet. It was at that moment that Everett Sims walked to the counter, set his box down 3 feet to the left of the badge, and said quietly, not making a scene, not performing anything, "Hold on a second." Garrett looked up. Alonzo Webb looked over. Everett Sims wasn't looking at either of them. He was looking at the badge. "That's a detective's shield," Everett Sims said. "I know what it is," Alonzo Webb said. His voice was even, not hostile. Even. "Chicago PD?" A pause. 32 years. Everett Sims nodded slowly. He picked up the badge. He held it the way you hold something that belongs to someone else, carefully, like borrowed weight. "My uncle was on the job," Everett Sims said. "Detroit, 20 years. He turned the shield over. He died with his on his dresser. Wouldn't let my aunt move it. Said it was the only thing he'd ever done that he was proud of every single day." Alonzo Webb didn't say anything. "Are you proud of it?" Everett Sims asked. The question sat in the room. Garrett looked between them. The rain hit the window. Alonzo Webb said, "Every single day. Then don't sell it." "Son," Alonzo Webb's voice was still even, but there was something underneath it now, something old and tired and held together by will alone. "You don't know what I'm working with." "No," Everett Sims said. "I don't." He set the badge back down on the counters, gently, the way you set something down when you intend for it to stay. But I know what that's worth, and it's not $40. He picked up his cardboard box. He set it on the counter in front of Garrett. Open it, he said. Inside the box, wrapped in a dish towel that had flowers on it, yellow flowers faded from washing, was a watch, not a flashy watch. Not the kind of watch you'd see in a magazine. It was a man's dress watch, gold-toned with a cream face and Roman numerals and a small crack in the crystal at the 7 o'clock position. It was the kind of watch that told you it had been worn to church, to job interviews, to graduations, the kind of watch that had been wound by the same hands for decades. Garrett picked it up, examined it, turned it over. On the back engraved in small letters, "To James, you made it. Mom, 1974. Viltage Hamilton," Garrett said, almost to himself. "Manual wind. This is." He paused. "Where'd you get this?" "My grandfather's," Everett Sims said. "He got it when he graduated from Tuskegee. Engineering degree 1974. My grandmother saved for 2 years to buy it." Garrett set it down carefully. He was quiet for a moment. "I can do $250, Garrett said. "Then give him $250, Everett Sims said. He nodded toward Alonzo Webb. "Put it toward whatever he needs." The room went silent. Alonzo Webb turned and looked at Everett Sims directly for the first time. He looked at him the way you look at someone when you are trying to understand what you are actually seeing. Everett Sims was looking at the watch, not at him. His jaw was tight. His hands, Alonzo Webb noticed, were not entirely steady. "You can't do that," Alonzo Webb said. "I'm doing it. That watch belonged to your grandfather. I know who it belonged to." Everett Sims picked up the dish towel, the one with the yellow flowers, and folded it carefully like he was putting something away. He also used to say that the thing about being given something valuable is that it teaches you what's worth giving away. He tucked the towel under his arm. "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." "How much do you need?" Alonzo Webb asked. He wasn't asking to argue. He was asking because the question mattered. Everett Sims looked at him then. He almost smiled. "More than $250. Me too." They stood there for a moment, two men in wet jackets in a pawn shop, and something passed between them that didn't need a name. "Then keep the watch," Alonzo Webb said, "and keep the badge." He picked the shield up off the counter, held it for a second, slid it back into his jacket pocket. "Neither one of us should be in here." Garrett watched them go. He wasn't a sentimental man. He'd been in this business for 19 years, and he'd seen things come across his counter that would make you understand exactly how fast a life can come apart. He'd learned early not to ask too many questions. It was better for business and better for sleep. But he stood at his window and watched the two men stop on the sidewalk in the rain, and he watched them talk. Not long, 2 minutes maybe, and then he watched the older man reach into his jacket and write something on a slip of paper and hand it to the younger man. And then they went separate ways. Garrett went back behind his counter. He looked at the dish towel Everett Sims had left behind. Yellow flowers, soft, from years of washing. He picked it up without knowing why, set it on the shelf behind him. He didn't throw it away. Alonzo Webb walked back to his apartment with the badge in his pocket and $212 in his hand. He hadn't asked where it came from. Everett Sims had pressed it on him outside. Cash, folded once, no explanation except, "For the alternator. Don't argue with me, man. I'm a federal employee. I know where you live." Alonzo Webb had laughed, a real laugh, not the polite kind. The kind that comes up from somewhere and surprises you. He didn't know Everett Sims. He'd known him for 11 minutes. He'd watched a man hand over his grandfather's graduation watch to a stranger in a pawn shop, and then turn down the payout and hand the cash to that same stranger instead. He'd watched a man in a Postal Service jacket, soaking wet, make a decision that cost him something real. Alonzo Webb had spent 32 years studying people, reading rooms, watching hands and eyes and the spaces between words. He'd interviewed hundreds of witnesses, dozens of suspects, a few people who turned out to be neither. He thought, after all that time, that he understood most of what people were capable of. The worst of it, mostly, but sometimes the other thing. He was still learning about the other thing. He got home. He set the money on the kitchen counter next to the electric bill. He put the badge on the table next to it. He sat down. He looked at both of them for a while. Then he picked up his phone and called his daughter in Atlanta. "Dad?" She answered on the second ring, which meant she'd been worried. She always answered fast when she was worried. He'd never told her that he'd noticed. "Hey, baby. Are you okay? You sound." He looked at the badge. "I'm all right." I just wanted to hear your voice. She talked for a while. He listened. At some point, she said something funny, and he laughed, that real laugh again, the one that came from somewhere, and she got quiet for a second and said, Dad, when's the last time I heard you laugh like that? He thought about it. Today, he said. First time today. Everett Sims got back to his apartment at 4:15. He sat down at his kitchen table and looked at the empty space where the box had been on top of his refrigerator for 2 years. He thought about his grandfather, James Sims, who'd graduated from Tuskegee University in 1974 with an engineering degree and gone on to work at an aerospace firm in Huntsville, Alabama for 34 years, designing components for systems that his name was never on because that's the way things were then. He thought about his grandmother, who'd worked double shifts at a hotel laundry to buy that watch and presented it to her husband in a restaurant with shaking hands because she'd never spent that much money on anything in her life. He thought about what his grandfather used to say, "Don't hold things so tight you forget what hands are for." He didn't regret it. He'd been afraid he would. That's why it had taken him 2 years to walk into that shop. He'd been afraid that the moment the watch left his hands, he'd feel something break open that wouldn't close. But sitting in his kitchen at 4:15, with his Postal jacket still damp on the back of his chair and nothing in the box on top of his refrigerator, Everett Sims felt something he hadn't expected. Light. Like he'd been carrying something for a long time and had finally put it down in the right place. His phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize, Chicago area code. He answered it. "This is Webb," the voice said. "Alonzo Webb. We met today. I know who you are." "I wanted to." A pause. Alonzo Webb, Everett noticed, was a man who chose his words. "I wanted to say thank you, and I wanted to ask you something. Go ahead. You said you were short. More than 250 short." Everett laughed a little, short and tired. "Yeah, I know a woman," Alonzo Webb said. "Runs a workforce center on the south side, helps guys find union work, postal, transit, facilities, real work. I worked with her when I was on the job, community programs. She's good at what she does." Another pause. "I could make a call." Everett Sims sat in his kitchen for a moment and said nothing. "I'm not in Chicago," he finally said. "She has a counterpart in every major city. It's a network." Alonzo Webb let that sit. "It's what I've got to offer. It's not $212. "No," Everett Sims said. "It's better than that. There's something people don't tell you about pawn shops. They're full of stories that got interrupted. Watches that belonged to someone's grandfather. Badges that belonged to someone's 32 years. Guitars, rings, cameras, medals. Every one of them the period at the end of someone's sentence. Every one of them a decision made in a room that smelled like glass cleaner and old metal. Most of those stories end there. Object goes one way, person goes the other, and the space between them fills up with whatever comes next, which is usually just more of the same. But sometimes a door chimes at exactly the right moment, and a man carrying a box walks in from the rain, and two people who have no reason to trust each other end up standing on a sidewalk in the wet, exchanging phone numbers and something harder to name. Alonzo Webb got his alternator fixed the following Tuesday. He drove to the workforce center on Wednesday. He sat across from a woman named Phyllis who'd been doing this work for 23 years, and he asked her what she needed from him. She told him. He said yes. He started volunteering on Thursday mornings, interviewing veterans, mostly retired officers, ex-military, men in their 50s and 60s who'd spent decades in service and were now sitting in plastic chairs in workforce centers, not knowing how to talk about what they were worth in a language the civilian world would recognize. Alonzo Webb was good at that. He'd spent 32 years reading people and putting language to what he saw. He was, it turned out, exactly what that place needed. 6 weeks later, Everett Sims started a full-time position with a transit authority in his city. Union job, benefits, a schedule that made sense. On his first day, he put on a uniform that wasn't wet. He stood at the mirror in his apartment and buttoned each button slowly, the way his grandfather used to button his work shirts. Each one deliberate, each one a small act of intention. He thought about the watch. He thought about the 7 o'clock crack in the crystal, the cream face, the small engraved letters on the back. To James, "You made it." Everett Sims looked at himself in the mirror for a long moment. Then he nodded at his own reflection. The way you nod at someone you're glad to see. You made it. The thing about a ripple is that it doesn't ask your permission. You drop something into still water, whether you mean to or not, whether you're ready or not, Whether you even know what you're doing, and the water moves. It moves in every direction. It moves past what you can see. Alonzo Webb doesn't know that Everett Sims has a son, 12 years old, who watched his father come home that rainy afternoon and sit quietly in the kitchen for a while and then make a phone call in a voice that sounded different, steadier, cleaner, like something had been set down that had been carried for a long time. That boy doesn't have the words for what he saw, but he felt it. He filed it away in the place where children file the things they don't have words for yet, the things that become the architecture of who they'll be. Everett Sims doesn't know that Garrett, the pawn shop owner, hung the dish towel with the yellow flowers on a hook in the back room. He doesn't know that on hard days, and there are hard days in that business, days when the counter is full of other people's interrupted stories, Garrett sometimes looks at it, just looks at it. He couldn't tell you why. He doesn't try. And none of them know that Alonzo Webb, one Thursday morning at the Workforce Center, sat across from a retired Army staff sergeant named Bryce who hadn't worked in 8 months, and whose wife had given him 90 days to figure something out, and that Alonzo Webb looked at this man's hands, steady, practiced, the same kind of steady he'd known in himself, and said something that nobody had said to Bryce in years. You're worth more than you've been told. Let's put a number on it. A badge on a glass counter. A watch in a dish towel. 2 men in wet jackets on a sidewalk in the rain. The sky above them looked exactly the same as it always did. Gray and indifferent and enormous. Completely unaware of what had just happened underneath it. That's the thing about still water. You never see the ripple from where you're standing when it starts.